For me, my wife Kathy, we're very much in this together, and we always have been. I think it's being a songwriter, it's very much part of your core being, and I think my wife's always been lovely like that. She's understood that it's part of who I am, and that there will be times when I'm kind of slightly remote from the family because I'm working on something perhaps inside my head as much as on a guitar or something. I think we are just a partnership in every respect, and in fact it was we were driving back from Real World Studios one day when I proposed to her. I think it was just we'd had such a great time as that partnership, doing things together, enjoying each other's company as part of it, that it just kind of just felt the right thing to do. So you like any relationship, you put time and effort and into things, but she's my wife's great, and she's always been my right hand girl all the way down the line.
Well, I did, and I've seen a lot of failed relationships. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's an easy thing. Yeah. It's mainly because the hours are so difficult, and you do get called at the last minute, and you are often called for a long period of time. You're often called during school holidays or special days, birthdays, and I think some partners find that really difficult. So I live with a musician. Even that is hard. We have our fights about it. Yeah. But at least we understand the basic condition of our work, which is that it's last minute, it's obsessive. Let's not forget that.
It's not one of those things.
It's definitely not a 9-to-5 job where you can cut off. You have to come home and do all your admin on your computer. I mean, Jesus.
For me, and it's funny, my closest musical mates, we've been with our partners since we were 20, 21 years old. And that makes a big difference because my wife, she's seen me go from struggling as a musician to making a living as a musician. So I've been able to adapt my life in regards to her understanding what I need to do. So I think the guy from Pink Floyd, if you're touring, he said, you should take your wife or take a divorce lawyer. And it made me, but my wife's very understanding about when I have to go away for a period of time. That's what I do. And so she knew what I wanted to do from the very beginning, and ultimately she's incredibly supportive. She's not a musician, and in fact that's cool for me. It's like she's not a musician, takes me away from the obsession of always going on about music, but totally supportive. And financially, when your reality can be is like, it's tough at the beginning trying to get it going. To have someone who's that secure one, that's I think we've all been there. And it's not easy. I think it's probably one of those things that's not really asked a lot, but I'd be curious to see how many relationships stay together. But all the guys I'm with, that I know, all of them are still with their partners. That's because they've met them very early days.
I'm not a good person to ask because I've failed miserably at that. I've got children, and I love my daughters very much, but I think from my experience, being with a musician is not an easy thing for the person who's got to live with a musician, and being with people sometimes is not a good thing for a musician to have to do as well. So I'm pretty doomed, really. It's a really difficult thing to answer. I don't know if I knew the answer, I'd crack it, won't I? I don't know. Yeah. I just think it's a musician. Being a musician is an unusual life, and it's just like that. It's I can't really answer it, Steve. I don't know, and I don't have I don't have a magic answer for it, and it's something that I've not been good at. And if I knew the answer to it, then I'd put it into practice. But it seems to be that's the way it is.
You miss a lot of it. That's how it goes. Like if you're touring, you miss a lot of it. So that's why sometimes it's good not to tour. You've got to mix it up, but it's better to mix things up. That's why I like being in the studio and stuff more, just doing something different. You get bored. Something when you do too much of something that seems good, it's boring. You've got to mix it up. So like that's why I like touring. Sometimes I like to mix the touring, maybe going out doing a workshop, being in the studio. You know, do music, but just do different things in music. Then you don't get bored. If I just tour too much, I'm just bored of it. You know what I mean? It just becomes like a job, and it's just like, because you're tired, it's just, yeah, it's like a treadmill. But you mix it up, then you'll enjoy it more.
With my personal situation, she works 4 days a week, so she's always got 3 days off, unless she's mega busy, in which case she will not. But so I always try to make sure that I don't work those 3 days as best as possible. And in the evenings, fortunately, I don't have to go into town and conduct a show, so that works really well. It's only when I get to like the sharp end that it starts to interfere. But I think you know, she's very patient for me, and I always, you know, even when I'm knackered, I try to be there for her, even at the sharp end, you know, and that's very important. You know, you can't just become totally consumed and selfish. You still got to give where you can, you know, even if it's only a little bit. And when you do get the chance, then you give. Obviously, you've got to give a lot and store up your brownie points for the next season.
I'm really lucky in that I'm married. My wife Leanne she's an artist as well, and she's also extremely understanding. So if I can't sleep and I need to make music all night or explore the latest patch I've been working on in software, she'll let's a funny word. She'll encourage me to go and work on that rather than stay up all night just lying there doing nothing. So I think it can work if your partner understands what it's about and is supportive. And I think if you're really passionate about something, other people can see that and hopefully will respect it, just as you would respect it in them.
Just like, I mean, you know, I don't want to, you know, but don't be a I mean, that's, you know, all of us have our edges in our personality, don't we? And especially when we're younger, whatever. So it's very easy to get into sort of, you know, tussles with people over petty things or whatever. We've all done it, and I don't think I've always behaved in a nicest way, especially when I was younger. In fact, only when I was younger, because after a while, I think it's just like any other thing. Just try and look after people, try and be nice to people, try and remember you're not the bee's knees and, you know, you're lucky to be where you are and all that. You know, nowadays there's no division or hierarchy when we work together. So I'll go out with the monitor guy, I'll go out with the driver, I'll go out and we all do that. We all mix with each other like mates. And that's the thing to do. Just keep your mates, remember who you are, isn't it? And don't try and pull rank on people. There are divisions in this business. The band get better treatment than the road crew. You know, the road crew get better treatment than the humpers. And there are these things that are different. We get better food, we get better seats on aircraft, or whatever, those things. But then none of it matters, really. Just remember that we're all doing it for the same reason, to make a living. Yeah.
I make a living from it, and can you? Okay, the industry's changed big time, as we know. Back in the day, there used to be a time when I was doing the first albums that I did, it was all done independently with small little labels. The big thing was about getting that deal. And I can remember even back then going for a meeting with a label, and a bigger label, and I remember saying, oh, would we be able to do our own marketing artwork? And I remember them laughing at me, going, no, we've got it in-house here. And they weren't prepared to say what the costs were for all these sort of things and everything. So I did all that myself, and my multimedia business partner has evolved with me in regards to that. And the industry now there's more of an expectation that you will do a lot of this yourself, or you'll use third parties and you'll know your costs and everything else that goes with it. It's more about partnerships now rather than being dictated to in order to get your product out there. And in fact, there was a time when you wouldn't be able to get in certain magazines, or, you know, because you're not with the established labels. That's changed. You know, you can get your own PR pluggers and stuff like that. If you've got a project or story to tell, you can get that, and that's the great thing about now. But obviously, you've got to be smart about your revenue streams, and that most musicians, I'd say, they don't rely on any one thing. You know, so you'll find that whether it be education, whether it be using your music for production, the instrumental music in libraries, or there's lots of different avenues to make a living as a musician. And you know, we've all, for me, I've been doing that for many years, but it's really interesting how many of my colleagues now who play with a lot of the bigger bands, they're far more sort of autonomous in regards to having different things that they do, and that's a good thing. But definitely, for me, I'm lucky. You know, I make a decent living out of it, but that's because I diversified into lots of different areas, and I'm always juggling the revenues. When one thing goes down, you know, I have to step it up in that part of the business. You know, so but absolutely, you can make a living. It's a big bugbear of mine that the education system seems to have this mentality that, you know, okay, you got your core subjects, and that's, you know, that dominates, and it's like, hold on a minute, there's a whole facet of things that you can do in the arts, and I think it's sometimes underplayed. But yeah, absolutely, I say to musicians, you know, yes, you can make a living, but be open about the different ways in which you're going to do that.
It's like any self-employed business. As long as you have to appreciate generally you need more than one kind of stream. So although I do Iggy, I also do 3 or 4 other gigs as well. I'll do sessions from home, and sometimes I'll teach as well. As long as you're aware and you plan what's coming up, and you can fill those gaps with other work, and you plan ahead, there's no reason why not. Just as a plumber would do that. You know, you have periods of lots and lots of work, then it'll go quiet again. It's start being self-employed. So it's no different to that. As long as you're professional and not a dick, then you just always go and do a good job. You get on with people. You play well, your gear's good, you turn up on time, you take care of business, and then other people will call you, someone will recommend you, you'll get to play with a new band and meet new people, and then that will spawn other work as well. So as long as you're not an idiot about it, and you apply yourself well, and you're good at your job, then yeah, absolutely, just be professional.
Music's always been one of those things. It's an expensive thing to do. And when you're putting stuff out, and there's a lot of stuff you need to get together in advance of releases, and particularly Big Train, it is a big band in the sense there's a lot of entourage. There's 30 musicians when we go out on stage. That's a lot of food, lodgings, water, transport, all of that. You know, so by the time these things filter down, and we've also got to make the next product, there's been years where we've put most of the money back into the making of the products. I've done sessions in the past, and I have made money playing like bits and pieces, mainly kind of flute work or kind of backing vocal work or, you know, voice work. So I could, but I don't put myself out as a session musician because I don't have the time, Steve. It sounds crazy because Big Train takes up a lot of time, and that's kind of it. You know, it's looking that we will get to the point where we can earn a living at it. And but it's over up until now. I mean, it's looking more so like we will now. But the years leading up to it, it's been a balancing act. And that, to be honest, that puts strain on relationships as well. Linking back to your previous question, and that's understandable. Because it's it is understandable why that would put a strain on a relationship.
You've got to be realistic. When you're deciding if you want to follow it as a profession, because it is a tough industry. There's a lot of people vying for the same jobs, whether it be in my side, whether it be in West End theatre, or whether it be in the classical sphere. You know, it's probably even harder if you want to be a classical soloist. Then there's young people now coming out of music colleges, and they're incredible. And they're all snapping at your heels, and they all want your job. If you sort of, you know, been through the ranks and you have a nice position, which I feel fortunate to have, the people behind you, they want your job, and there's probably a lot of people, you know, would do anything to get it. But yes, you've got to work harder. You've got to make sure that you don't, you know, piss too many people off along the way. You've got to do the right thing. You've got to be a team player. You've got to get on with people as best you can, and always give them what they want to the levels they want, and hopefully they'll give you better and better jobs, and then you will build yourself up into a position which will make it pay for yourselves. That's turning it around to a kind of an advice kind of point of view for people thinking, but unless you're prepared to 100% commit, then there will be people behind you that will 100% commit and will probably get the jobs ahead of you. You would find it more difficult to make a living that you can stick with. Some people, you know, they sell fridges now that I went to college with, and they probably really like it, probably make more money than I do. But, you know, that's, yeah, it certainly is possible, but you've got to work for it.
You have to have an ability to adapt. I think that my success has been because I've been able to change things that I do and not be attached to a particular way of doing it. So this applies all the way down the line. Like when I just gave that example of the composer who wants to try different ways. Mm-hmm. Some people get really offended if they're asked to change their basic style of playing. Whereas I think that it's actually a skill that you can do that and that you can add 5 or 6 different ways of playing. I picked up other instruments. I picked up a lot of world music, violins, Comanches and lyras and different string instruments, the hardanger fiddle, you know, to try out sound, because I was interested in the sound that they made and I wanted to use them in my own compositions. So, you know, you try it out and you sort of work out, you've got the basic violin technique, you can try these things out. And even if it's the cello way of playing, which Comanche is, you know, you try it out. Mm-hmm. So I think that also an ability to be open to trying things. So adaptability and also getting on well with people. That's a huge aspect. I have met a few young people straight out of college who are quite arrogant about their skills and not really interested in meeting other people who had had experience and who were convinced that what they had was enough. And actually it's not. You know, you need to learn other stuff. You need to get experience from people who are already experienced, and you need to listen to those people because they actually are your key to getting work. They are the people that you need to network with. As a musician, you rely on other musicians to get work. Mm-hmm. So if they like you and they get on with you and they think that you're okay, then they'll recommend you. Mm-hmm. So that's like a huge part of the industry. I think also the ability to get on with different kinds of people. So composers, conductors, other musicians, that really helps. And obviously taking completely for granted the ability to play your instrument, you know.
Yeah, it's a given, I guess.
But I think that's like the basic thing, you know, and everything, then there's other skills that need to be learned. And obviously we've all got to learn admin skills and tax and all of that stuff, which is just a drag, but, you know, you have to do it. Mm. But then if you want to compose on computers, you need to learn software. Yeah. Now there are courses on how to compose on Mac, but, you know, with Sibelius and things, but there weren't when I started. Yeah. And again, you need that ability to just try stuff out. Yeah. And there's one other thing, because we're freelance, if you treat someone badly, that does get around.
That's another thing I would say to anybody who wants to do that, is diversify. So anything to do with music that someone asks me to do, I can sort of have a go at. I've always said yes to. So whether it's helping someone out in a studio with a recording session when I was really young and knew more than they did about that process, or whether it's composing a jingle for a toothpaste commercial, or whether it's playing with a singer in a local pub who needs an accompanist, or whether it's playing with Iggy Pop. Just try and say yes to everything and learn on the job and learn something from everything, because everything can be learned from still. And so I have made a living, and I've got songwriting royalties and writing, you know, that sort of thing a little bit, because I've had co-writes with David Bowie and Morrissey, and royalties from my production music. And then there's the kind of, you know, being paid as just a wage to come out and play a gig or whatever. So yeah, I've always made a living from music. There have been moments when there's been a pinch point where you think, should I put a radio in my car and be a taxi driver? But thankfully they've never come to pass. I mean, a lot of musicians I know are teachers. I don't think I've got the patience to be a teacher. I've had 1 or 2 private pupils for people as favours, and that doesn't last long. It's not. I don't think it's always me. Some of them just want to talk about Guitar Hero, and if they do that, I just let them. But so I'm not really a teacher. But the diversification thing is important. Just turn your hand to anything that you can do: songwriting, production, you know, recording people, all sorts of things. I've had studios over the years, so I've spent a number of years just literally engineering sessions for people and things like that. So just try and do everything. It's harder and harder to make a living out of music, isn't it? For youngsters, I think, because there's no record industry anymore, except for a very few at the top. There's no machine which invests money in talent anymore. You have to sort of do everything yourself now, so it's harder.
Yeah, because that's all I've ever done. So I have to make a living out of it. I mean, you can, but you have to do different things. You don't just try and do one thing in music. Like I said, be a producer, do teaching, do gigs. There's loads of different things you can do within the music. So try and have a circle of different things and just go through the circle. Yeah. You know what I mean? Even if it doesn't have to be like that, it can be like this, whatever. But just my point is, do different things within music, and then you can have a better career because you can make money in different ways. You know, you're not always waiting for somebody to ring you, say, can you do this gig? Because that call might not come through. You always rely on somebody else as well. Try and do something which is centered around you. Yeah. Yeah. Because if you don't, then it's harder because you're always waiting for that phone call.
Yeah, amazingly, somehow it's ended up that I make a living solely from doing music. Recently I began teaching music a little bit. It wasn't really because things were going so disastrously that I had to. I just wanted to, and I found that really, really enjoyable. Some years are better than other years. Last year was quite good. The year before was a complete disaster.
Yeah, we understand.
I don't know how we lived. So you have to be a bit frugal. Yeah. And my wife's understanding in that area, and my non-musician Hungarian relatives, who some of them come from the village. And I don't mean this at all disparagingly, but in their minds, you're either Justin Bieber in music, or you're Hans Zimmer maybe at the most, or you're nothing. And I really think people should realise, or I wish I'd realised earlier, that there's so many paths to take, and you can be not very famous and still make a living off music, because you can do production. I even started getting into kind of adding sounds to. I stumbled into it by accident, but because my own music involved such detailed audio editing, I started doing not just the music for some adverts, but some of the sound effects, like the Foley sound. Yeah. And I wasn't taught that formally, but it kind of transitioned naturally. So you'll never know what will open up. There's so many possibilities to make a living off music. Meeting someone else's vision can be just as creative as... I mean, what I really love doing is sitting there with no agenda, no control, no one to answer to, and creating for the sake of creating. But it's just as beautiful to have a director or another musician or artist or even visuals dictate a new direction. That's creatively satisfying in a whole other brilliant way. So.
Good to get free stuff. Free stuff is lovely, but it isn't really free, is it?